Well,
Hey.
we are back, you all. How are y'all doing? We hope that you're doing well. Welcome to the Vibe Political Show.
Welcome.
We are so excited to discuss why we tell stories. But before we even get started, what we like to do is just see how y'all are doing. Please comment. Let us know how you're doing. I'll start first with how I'm doing. I'm doing well. As you all probably, most of you probably know, I am on leave right now. And Brandon and I are here in person. Very excited to do the show in person. And we're going to be doing this as much as we can throughout the duration of the show and everything. We're going to just try to do at least maybe every other month, doing a live in person where we are physically together and everything. As Brandon and I were talking about the other day, like I mean, just us being in person, there's just it's just a higher motivation, a higher energy, a higher this is higher engagement. We can feel each other's energies when we're talking. So I really like the fact that we are in person to do this live. So, but yeah, we're excited. I'm doing good. I do leave tomorrow to go to Fort Eustis for training. And then that's all next week. And then I head back on the 30th to go back to Kentucky and go
To
back
the Ville.
to the Ville.
Louisville.
Not Louisville, like some people be saying.
Louisville.
Really, Louisville. Really, it's Louisville. But yeah, so I go back on the 30th to go back home and go back to reality. No more leave and no more TDY. It's going back to reality and having to deal with cadet summer training coming up for me on May 11th. So I'm doing good. How are you, Brandon?
It's good to hear. I'm glad. It's good that we're here doing the show together. Like it's great. It's a good feeling to know that you came on board and we're doing this together. So I'm doing well. I just had TDY and was at Fort Hood, Texas for a week, and now I'm about to go to New Mexico tomorrow for the week, and then I come back on a Saturday. It's kind of whack sometimes, like if you leave on a Sunday and come back on a Saturday, because then like your weekend is, taken up. But I have vacation planned, so going to Florida, to Fort Lauderdale, so that should be a good time. We had a fun time last night on the town in DC. We went to H Street, if anybody knows, where H Street is in DC, and we had a great time. And maybe we need to post those photos on our Vibe page or our Instagram. I didn't even think about that.
No.
So, well.
Yeah, we can go ahead and get started. So we will be right back. Welcome back, you all. So once again, welcome to the Biblical Show. We are back. So I'm so excited to talk about this topic, why we tell stories. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right on in, y'all. So some of the questions that I feel that a lot of us have is when it comes to storytelling of any kind. And what I'm going to be doing is discussing the science behind storytelling. And of course, you all know that I kind of look up some of the academia behind the topics that I discuss. So I'm just so excited to talk about this. So some of the questions that we have when we tell stories and why we tell stories is, have y'all ever thought, why is my friend late? So when you think about a question like that, why is my friend late? You want to, I see, Brandy gave me that look because, that's sidebar, but, because somebody was late. I'm not going to say who was late.
Okay.
But anyway, why is my friend late? So all of us want an explanation as to why your friend was late. So with that, there's a story behind why someone is late. There's always a story, but on top of that, there's an explanation too. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about the difference between storytelling and telling a story, and then within that story, the explanation behind it. So I'm going to go into both of those arenas so y'all can kind of get an understanding. So why is my friend late is one question to think about. And what is exactly happening when I sneeze? Now, before we went on live, I've been sneezing, so I'm going to put it up there. So Brandon has 3 lovely cats, and I think that I have a small allergy to them. It's not heavy, because I don't think I would be in this house this long if I was allergic to cats, but I have a slight allergy. So all 3 of his cats was kind of around here at one point, and then the sneezing began. I'm okay, and the cats aren't around. Well, one of them is that boo there, but it's funny that I have this question within my notes here about what is exactly happening when I sneeze, because now it's making me think, what's going on in my body that is causing me to sneeze? How am I sneezing? What is happening? Does my heart stop? Do I stop breathing? Like, these are all questions I have, right? So I want to talk to you all about Princeton University psychologist Tania Lombrazzo. I'm hoping I'm saying her name right. She was very interested in why we come up with these questions, right? And how our drive, though, to make sense of the world reveals something very fundamental about our minds and how we think. So as a researcher, Tania has been fascinated about how our minds yearn for stories and explanations. Like I said, how our minds yearn for that and what happens when we can't really find them. And I'm going to go into a deeper scenario. So she shared a story of when she was trying to find parking at Berkeley University, where she was a professor for many years before she went to Princeton. She stated that if she were to park there at noon on a Tuesday, that is a good time to park because most of those professors would be out for lunch. So she was trying to navigate when to find parking is around that time. Then she thought of the engineer lot being available as well during that time but during that time, it was unsuccessful. Either way, she was like, I can't figure out when is the best time for her to find parking. So she said that she kept coming up with theories in her mind as to when to park to ensure she had a parking space. So her theories would work for like a week or two, but they didn't last. So she was asked a question in the interview, what is the connection between the world of stories and the world of explanations? Like what is the connection between a story and then explaining the story? So she replied that both stories and explanations are ways that we really try to make sense of or understand the world around us. So she views it as 2 ends of a continuum. So a good story, so think about this, a good story is one that is full of detail and create visual images and emotions, right? But a good explanation is a bit more abstract. So think of just an explanation. So it might appeal to general features of the world, just a generalization of what happened. So if we look at everyday cases of explanations, we do a mix of storytelling and appealing to more general features of the world. So she provided an example of a person asking their coworker on why they were late to work. So I want y'all to think about this on her way to work. So a general idea is, oh, she was just stuck in traffic probably, right? So that may be the explanation. Honey, I was stuck in traffic. So if I ask you, Brandon, why were you late? Why were you running late? Like, what was going on? And your explanation is, honey, Andre, I was stuck in traffic. That's an explanation. But the storytelling comes in is this. She woke up 5 minutes later than usual. That's a story. They were rushed. Then she burned her toast. All these different things create the story. So the explanation is, oh, I was stuck in traffic. That's a general feature. That's a general feature. That's a generalized excuse as to why I'm late. But honey, there was so much stuff that happened in between her being stuck in traffic. She woke up 5 minutes later than usual. She felt rushed. She burned her toast that she was trying to make it. Those are the concrete details.
The avocado toast too.
The avocado toast, right?
Oh,
So those are concrete details within. So there's a story along that line.
Mhm.
So that gives us their perspective on how their morning was like and their emotions about how they were dealing with those events, right?
Mhm.
So she stated that we do both things, which is storytelling, providing the concrete details, and we do the explaining, which is extracting the structure
Okay.
of the world in a way that is generalizable. So a generalized response that you would give me is, "Hey, I was stuck in traffic."
Mhm.
That's the generalized, like which is that abstract view, that explanation. Oh, well, the overall explanation, honey, is just I was stuck in traffic.
Right.
But honey, there was so much going on within that.
Mhm.
So that's where the storytelling comes into play. So I just found that fascinating because, like, if you think about running late for work and your coworker asks you, "Hey, why were you late?" "Honey, I was stuck in traffic." That may be all you tell them. But you're not telling them the emotional roller coaster you were on, how you burnt your toast. I was trying to make some avocado toast, like you just said, and it burnt. Like there's so much stories in that, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to get to it.
Okay.
But was there a correlation between? Because I was thinking, depending on my relationship with my coworker, would probably be the stories I'm telling or the generalized explanation. So if I have a stronger relationship, I probably will give them the details because maybe they would care. You know, they would be generally inquisitive about why I was late, not just why were you late. And also, it may be by the way that they ask. You know what I mean? Like, why were you late? Like, it's not normal for you to be late. Or why were you late? Like, if it's the second one, I just be like, I was in traffic. You know, but if it was a relationship where I have a good relationship with my coworkers and they're generally concerned, I might give them the whole story.
I think that's a really good perspective too, because like someone that I'm friends with or someone that I'm cool with, I may go into storytelling. Mm-hmm. But she was just trying to separate what a storytelling is, right, and then what the true explanation is. The true explanation could just be I was stuck in traffic, okay, or I woke. Another general one could be I just woke up late. Mm-hmm. But she didn't even share her emotional roller coaster of the toast and all that stuff. Okay. So yeah, thank you for that. So what is powerful is that explanations and stories are about constructing models for the world. They allow us to cut through confusion and to instill complexity into simplicity. So the complexities of a story would be all the stuff I provided earlier, the details. The simplicity is, honey, I was just stuck in traffic or I woke up late. Right. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff within that, right? So her studies revealed that our capacity for explanations needed to be studied carefully. So our drive for explanation, in fact, needed explanation. It needed an explanation. So the explanation is what I said earlier. I was stuck in traffic or woke up late. That's just an explanation. But girl, what happened in between all that? Like, that's where the storytelling comes into play. Because now I'm giving you details as to why I was late for work. So for instance, there are times when this drive can make us curious and help us discover new things, which is the storytelling piece of it. But there are other times when our hunger for a simple story can have us leap to conclusions and become less curious. Right? So if you just gave me the explanation, I was just stuck in traffic, that's an explanation. But I may be less inclined to even find out more because you just gave me an explanation. The explanation cuts out the storytelling. Right? So she provided an example of when people are interviewing someone for a job. So think about someone applying for a job position in their business, right? When we interview people, so if we're the management, we interview people, we tend to construct a story about the kind of person they are and how they can fit into the job. Another example is their resume or letter of reference. If we tend to over-rely on our own story, though, that we construct, but under-rely on those other sources of evidence that don't fit into the story. So an example of that can mean, okay, I'll be a little bit more detailed. So we construct a story of an individual based on what we see when they come into the office. Right. So let's say they're very monotone. Like, so we're interviewing them. We saw all this amazing stuff on paper, like they look sharp, but when they come in, you're like, girl, why are they so dry? Like I need them to have a little bit more energy. So automatically, as humans, we construct our own story in our mind of what they're like. And so that's why she was saying that we over rely on our own story about what they are. We create our own story in our minds. But honey, on paper, they actually qualify for the position. And we under rely on that resume or those letters of references. Like when we get references and stuff, we under rely on that because when they came in to do the interview, I've already constructed my own story as to how they gonna be.
Right.
So is that good or bad?
It can be both.
And it can be both. Okay. So expound on that a little bit. Yeah, expound on that a little bit. How you feel it could be both.
I think it could be both good and bad. I'll start with it being good. Personal example. Like I think I asked you this question the other day. And when I asked you how long you've been in the Army, you said like 17 years. I've been in 21 years. After you've been in probably 10 for anybody who's in the military. It's not just military. Let's just say anybody who's been in their particular career field for 10 years or more. And you work with people. So a job where you work with people, you've been in it 10 years or more, you generally have, hopefully, emotional intelligence. So using your emotional intelligence, you can think that somebody is a certain way based on, your first impression of them because you're good at it now. Like you're good at reading people, you know what I mean? But there could be something going on. The reason why that's good, that's a good skill to have, right? You have discernment for the spiritual people, intuition for the Sherlock Holmeses out there. But then it could be bad because the person that you're getting, you don't know the backstory behind why that person is being monotone or boring in the interview. Maybe somebody gave them advice and/or they found out some bad news right before they came into the interview. So being able to look at what's on the paper, create the story in your head and balance those out and ask some questions to put off, the person that the resume is saying they are. I think, probably that would be a better fit employee rather than somebody who just, you went off of what's on paper or you fully went off of their presentation. Because people can act out, right? People, they practice interviews and maybe, they had somebody help them on their resume, but having a balance of both. And that would also, I think, show you how, if we're talking about we're the supervisors, we're the interviewers, it would help you probably see what the managers or supervise, like help you really see what they'll bring to the table. And if it's a job where you're working with people, it will help you see how they would work with the team.
And I'm glad you said that. So Tania said that basically what I said earlier, that we tend to over rely on our own story and under rely on the sources of evidence. For me, and this is just me speaking now, not her, but I think that it should be a balance. So you kind of explain that in a really good way because I think there should be balance. There should be an essence of you looking at what's on the paper, but then at the same time filling them out, that emotional intelligence that you said.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, someone can be very qualified for the position, but if their personality is not aligned with like how you feel they'll accomplish the mission or accomplish the tasks that are provided, then I may not hire them.
Right.
Because I'm like, I'm looking for someone that has a little bit more up. Because I could look at somebody with the same qualifications as the person that was monotone, and then I may be more inclined to hire them. But like you said, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time because they could have found out their dog died or their father is in the hospital.
Right. So
they are going to come in there monotone, but they have to suck it up and come to this interview because then they don't want to look bad. So there's stories behind all of that. So the explanation is what we see, but there's a story behind that explanation that we don't know about or that we tend not to know based on what you said. Like, oh, if I don't know you like that and I'm just a coworker, we just coexist in the same area and I don't know you like that, you'll just be like, oh yeah, I was stuck in traffic. Oh, so that's your explanation. Yeah. But there's a story behind that explanation.
Right.
So thank you for that, Brandon. So she shared a personal story about her pregnancy. And she shared that 7 months, y'all, into the pregnancy, that her daughter was breached. Do you know what that means?
No. The baby started to come out?
No.
Okay.
So at 7 months, and for those of y'all that are listening, please comment. But when a pregnant woman is breached, that means that the baby's head is not down, it's up. So basically, if she were to give birth, the legs would come out first. But doctors say that they want the head to come out first when the baby's born. So her head was up rather than down. So usually when women give birth, the baby's head is in the first thing that comes out.
Right.
So she did so much research, y'all. She did a bunch of research as to how to turn her baby's head, her daughter's head around before giving birth. But when it came to give birth, everything was fine. Everything was fine. And she came out with legs first and all that. So
the baby came out with legs first?
The baby came out with legs first.
Okay. And
that's not normal for a baby to come out legs first. Usually it's the head coming out first. So, but everything was fine. It was a successful pregnancy. So she always tells her daughter, who's now 7, about how stubborn she is, but tells us that the two don't have to connect. So in her mind, she's like, my baby ain't want to move and flip around. So being that her daughter is stubborn at the age of 7, she's like, that's why you stubborn, because when I gave birth to you, you ain't want to turn around. So, but she was revealing, she was like, I had to think in my mind, that's a story I'm creating here. Yes. But that's not the case. My baby is just stubborn because she's stubborn. It has nothing to do with her head not being at where it needed to be for her comfort when she gave birth. So she stated that it is very tempting to connect the two together and to see patterns about what we observe now in comparison to the past. And we formulate stories in our own head based off of our past experiences and try to connect it. Now, mind you, there can be some truth. Now, this is me talking now. There can be some truth to how behaviors of someone in the past can bleed into into the present moment, but she's saying that it's not always the case, and that we kind of have to get out of the habit of associating past experiences to the current, because they may not always align.
Yeah, I got to comment on that. I think for me personally, I do that sometimes. I think it's human nature to associate past experiences with the present, but I think what I sort of done is flip that to where it's more important about my condition, perception, ideas, my thoughts. So it's more about like what I'm thinking about rather than you. Oh Lord, why is that trying to listen to me? More about me. Because it's more, I'm seeing it more common, or what I've done most often is attribute somebody's behaviors to, like, I've made it about them and their behaviors and what they were like in the past and stuff. But I now looked at like, okay, what was I like? What did I tolerate or not tolerate? So I think that's how we can bring a balance to that and make it something positive. Because like, okay, let me give an example. You know, when you try to get your life together and like your friends might be like, oh, you think you better than everybody and you this, you that. And like, they don't want to let you be the new and improved you. And so they try to keep you tied down to it. So that's an example of how past experiences, right? People want to keep you pigeonholed in that space. So that's why I say, you know, make it more about who you were and what you're trying to do and where you're trying to grow, rather than other people and what they need to do. And that
I like that. That's powerful. That's powerful. Thank you for that, Brandon. So she mentioned that the world presents us in ambiguity, and we try to connect the dots in a way that tells a compelling narrative that it allows us to have order. In the interview, it was mentioned that she once woke up in the middle of the night after hearing mysterious sounds, right? And she went to look for an explanation, because, you know, in your mind, you're like, okay, what is going on? She noticed that her daughter and her mother were in the dark having a tea party at 3 a.m. in the morning. Now, so that's the baby's grandma and her having a tea party at 3 a.m. So she discovered, that her daughter woke up and was happy to know her grandmother was home. So her daughter thought it was morning time, like it was like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. She wasn't tracking time. But you got to think, and so she could easily told them, to go to bed, but she wanted to know why they were there at 3 a.m. So explaining what happened, so the explanation of what happened was important to knowing what was the correct response. So, what the correct response is to what you are seeing. So, like, in her mind, she's like, what is going on? She had no idea that her mother and her daughter was out playing. She needed the explanation. So it was kind of like, okay, I need to adjust how I respond to this because in my mind, I'm creating my own story. So once again, I'm creating my own story in my head as to what took place. But then once I got that explanation, then it's like, oh, well, that's what happened. So she didn't say, well, go back to bed. Like, it's like, she was like, okay, this is a cute moment between my mother and my daughter. Let them have their moment. So
I got something right there too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that like what I'm hearing is there's like a constant theme here. If you're the type of person who creates all your own stories in your own head, how are you gonna be a husband? How are you gonna be a wife? How are you gonna be a good friend? You can't, because it's only your interpretation of everything going on around you, and it makes you not be relatable. That's what I keep hearing. I just feel that like it's not like you can't have good relationship. You're not gonna have good relationships if everything is about your interpretation alone.
You preaching.
Okay.
I know, I love it. No, I love it because, and I think that's what she's trying to convey from an academia level is that, you're going spiritual, which I love, but she's basically saying like, we formulate these thoughts in our mind of what really went down. That's why we tell stories. We tell stories because we have our own thought process. Right. But it's very important to also find out the source of the information, get that out first, and then you have a true explanation. The explanation is, so I'll say this, the explanation, y'all, I believe is the actual fact behind the situation. The stories can be skewed because I have my own story in my mind of how something turned out, but honey, no, it wasn't like that. Get the explanation because the explanation is the fact behind it. Then you can realign your story to be like, okay, now I got the full story, which based off the explanation that I received. So moving on. So she stated that there's a lot that we can get out of an explanation for an event, especially when it involves people and concerns about responsibility and blame. You're talking about, right? And knowing why someone acted the way they did. Right. So not just going off of how they acted, but why they acted the way they did. It was revealed in the interview that we do not benefit from the explanations that we discover, but we benefit from the explanations from many people before us. So culture is a mechanism to transmit explanations from one generation to the next.
I can dig it.
So moving on, she mentioned the self-explanation effect. Self-explanation effect. It is coming to understand something better as a result of explaining it to yourself or to someone else. So I'm going to repeat that again. She mentioned the self-explanation effect. It is coming to understand something better as a result of explaining it to yourself. So being in your own head and explaining it, or to someone else. So this phenomenon is interesting, y'all, because it is a way of learning that occurs even when you are not getting new information. So it's kind of like sitting with yourself. So you jump to a conclusion or you leap to a conclusion, but sometimes you just have to sit with yourself and be like, okay, let me get out of my emotions and look at what is going on. And then you can actually explain a lot of what is going through your mind and come to your own conclusions. So she mentioned it as you are just rearranging and scrutinizing what is already in your head. In these moments, there's that aha moment. And you come to realize you understand something better, or sometimes come to realize you thought you understood something, but realize that there was a gap in your story that you needed to fill. And I'm going to explain that to y'all. I'm going to explain what that means. This may be a little bit controversial, so I'm just letting y'all know. So the illusion of explanatory depth, the illusion of explanatory depth. She stated that many of us feel like we understand how a lot of our devices work. So I want y'all to think about this. When asked that question, most of us immediately say, yes, I know how it works. So I'm going to ask you a question. Do you know how how to use a zipper? Well, how a zipper works? Do you know how a zipper works?
I think so.
Okay, so you just said I think so, right? So you think you know how a zipper works. So for her, she used an example, well, how a bicycle works, how a microwave works, or a zipper.
Mm-hmm.
But when someone is asked to explain it, explain how a zipper works.
Mm-hmm.
Then there comes that realization, like, that they appreciate the fact that they don't know how it works. It's like, I know how to use it, but explain how it works.
Right.
So the process of trying to form an explanation helps us appreciate that we really are falling short. Because we use zippers all the time. We use zippers to zip up our jackets and stuff, but explain how it works. Give me a deeper explanation. Do you really know? So she used metacognition. Have you heard of metacognition?
I have.
So she used metacognition as an example of a story about thinking we know something that we do not know. So she defined it as a way of not knowing something that we think we know. So she mentioned that there are techniques that storytellers use. Storytellers are constructing a story that has a mystery, confusion, and uncertainty. But when we find those things aversive, it serves as a hook that keeps us watching. So think about movies where you have a scary movie on, right? And you're trying to figure out, like, ooh, what's the ending? You're trying to predict how it's going to end, right? When the explanation is provided, it provides us with a burst of pleasure knowing the end result. So have y'all ever watched those movies where you're like, it's a cliffhanger?
Yes.
So you'd be like, so this story was good, but I still don't know how it ends.
Right.
It's going to bug you, right? Then you're going to be eager to find out, okay, when is this next part coming out? When is part 2? Because you ended on this cliffhanger. But if it ends in an explanation, that's when we're happy. So that's how the connection of storytelling and explanations work. The story is still going on, but if it ends on a cliffhanger, you don't have an explanation yet. So that's why we tell stories. We tell stories because there's a story in it and all that. But guess what? I want that explanation. Everybody wants that closing argument, that closing point of, oh, okay, now I know how. Okay, now I understand that whole story because now I got the explanation. So,
or I would be happy if there was multiple, if it was a way that I can interpret it, that it could be multiple endings. So like, I might predict that it was going to happen this, but the way the situation ended, maybe it didn't explain it all, but it gave me like 3 different routes, which I could take. Like maybe this happened, maybe that happened, or maybe that happened. Because sometimes that's kind of, I think, it's fun. It's fun because then we could talk about, like, if we went to watch a movie together, then we could talk about what we think happened afterwards.
But that's all in the storytelling part, though.
You're right.
But there are some people over there that be like, I need to know. I need to know what happened. They're waiting on the explanation and not getting it. And I know folks that are like that. They be like, can we get to the point? Like sometimes, so I'll speak on this for me with Georgie. Shout out to Georgie. Ooh. But I'm about to put on blast. So sometimes I'll be telling Georgie something. Actually, not Georgie. Let me not do Georgie like that. Lord forgive me. Stella. Yes, Stella. I'm talking about, if you watching this, Stella, I'll be telling a story, right? She be wanting to get to the end. So she be like, okay, but what happened? What's the end? I'm like, well, girl, I want to give you the suspense, girl. I need to give you the detail because I love giving story. That's why I wanted to do this episode because I want to go into the explanation of why we tell stories because it creates that visual image in our minds, like oh my God, okay, all right, I got that. Kind of like you like those multiple layers, like you get entertainment out of like, okay, I got that explanation, that one. I wonder how it ends. And then when it ends, you're like, oh, that's how it was. But Stella, no, she'd be like, what happened? What? I'm like,
get to the end.
Like, girl, what if I want to give you more information?
She hit the fast forward time 16.
Yeah, time 16. Right. Just be go. Like, girl, I want to give you everything. I want to give you I want to have people sit in my shoes. I want you to feel my emotions during that journey, not just be like, well, girl, I went to the store and I got hit on. Well, girl, can you tell me how you got hit on? I want to know how. Well, what hour were you on? Yeah. What was he? Was he checking you out? Was he looking at them cakes? Was he doing something? You know, like you want to know how it led up to. But if I just say, Stella, girl, I went to Target and I got hit on. That's all she be wanting to know. It's a clip. That's part of a cliffhanger because it's like, well, what happened? What was the end result? Did you get a number? Did you get the digits? Like, there's so much within a story, and people just want the explanation. It's like, well, girl. Like,
I think the story, like the way you're talking about this, like the stories just make it more fun.
It make it more juicy.
Like you get to have the experience. Like I wasn't there, but based on the way you tell the story, I get to have the experience with you.
Yes. But some people be like, no,
yeah.
What happened? What was the end result? Did you get some? Did you get it?
So can I put you on the spot real quick?
Okay.
Do more of your friends enjoy the story? Like, are you friends with more people who want to hear all of the details of the story, or friends with more people who are just like cut to the chase, get to the end point?
Yeah, you put me on the spot a little bit. No, it's fine. No, it's totally okay.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I do have friends, and this is no shade to Stella.
Yes, because we know you love Stella.
I love me some Stella. That's my girl. But yes, I do have more friends that want to hear the entire thing.
Yes.
It brings me joy when I have a friend, but I have those select few. I think the reason why I feel like they want to just get to the point is because let's see if I can say this in the right way. I think that people want to hurry get to the point because, oh Lord,
you know let me not
say that right now.
Look, okay, and the reason because I'm creating my own story right now, and the story that I'm creating is while you're telling us, about this research and why we tell stories, I'm sort of looking at my relationships and friendships and all of that, and the ones that are building, and our friendship, like I like all the deets, and I like to exaggerate some too, but I will tell Andre like when I'm exaggerating. So if I'm getting hit on at the grocery store, I'm gonna make it like
you gonna make it a whole production.
Yes,
and I like the production.
Yeah, and what's interesting though is I wasn't always that way. When I was younger, I didn't really want to talk much. My mom, she would make me practice conversation.
Yeah, you told me about this.
Yeah, she would her and my grandfather would sit with the dictionary and just look up words. And so we would make fun of words. Remember Living Color? And that dude would be like, the penetration of the castration of the whatever, and it was hooked on phonics. And then he had George Bush's wife going there.
Yeah.
So we used to make fun of words and stuff. And so my mother and my dad would make me tell stories and be detail oriented. So then it kind of just got me in the point of having the conversations and people who want to celebrate you. For me, I feel like maybe not for you, but for me, those relationships are stronger because they know more and they want to know more and they want to be a part of it. So I feel like for me, those relationships have more circulation.
Yeah, and I think I might as well just go ahead.
Okay,
so I'm gonna say it in the best way to not be attacking folks that just want to hurry and get to the point.
Right.
So what I'll say is this. I think for most of my friends that want to hurry and get to the explanation, it's the excitement of knowing knowing how it happened.
Okay, that's another
because they're really not that interested in how it happened. They just want to see me happy.
Yeah.
So I'll say that in defense to the ones that just want you to hurry. Let me know what happened. I just want you happy. So I don't care about the other stuff because as long as you are getting what you want, that's why they don't really engage in the deeds.
Right.
So that's their personality. But then on the flip side, I'll be kind of feeling some kind of way because when they tell me a story, they go into detail and I don't care because I like the deets. So I'm thinking well, dang, you don't let me go into the deets, but you can though. I'm just saying though.
Yeah.
Well, you get to go in the deets, and I'm like, yes, girl. What happened? Oh my God.
Yeah.
But then I don't get it back when I tell a story.
I got another piece. When you're telling the story to somebody and they not reacting off of it, do you tell it differently? I think I felt myself do that.
I low key do that. I be like, I ain't even gonna give you all the tea.
Are you listening? Did you hang up? Are you listening to me? I notice when I'm telling the story, I say, or I look for that verbal feedback.
You do that. Okay, so I want to talk about that a little bit. Then we
Okay.
got to move on because we got a lot. Well,
Okay.
we wrapping it up. We almost done with my notes.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to talk about that.
Mhm.
The whole, you know.
Mhm.
So you kind of threw me off a little. You throw me off quite a bit
Mhm.
when you do the you know, because I'm thinking like, well, I don't know. So I'm like, so I'm like, I want to know, but then you'd be like, yeah. So I went to the store, and yeah, I saw, this guy was hitting on me. And I'm like, get off my face, And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know.
Is that how I do it?
You do, and I'd be like, well, I don't know. Did you want him out your face, or did you engage a conversation? Because I'm like, I want to know.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's an example. He didn't. That's not a story, but I'm just saying, like, I'm using an example of like how he'll put me into it because I guess I have that it's really not empathy, but I like to be in it. So I'm in it with you. I mean, it may be empathy, but like I'm in it, and then like I don't have all the information yet. So when you say I'll be like, well, I'm trying to know. I don't really know yet. So I don't. It's subconscious. It is, and I know you don't mean any harm, but I'll be like, no, Brand, I'm trying to find out. I'm trying to know. Yeah. Like I'm trying to know. Okay. So you do that subconsciously, and I let it go because, but sometimes I'll be like, no, Brent, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I'm
not there yet. Catch me up. Yeah.
Please catch me up.
Okay.
So you do it. I think just in conversation, you say just because it's just it flows with how you're telling the story. Mm-hmm. It's not, you're not saying like I know, like I was there with you, right? Because I'm not there. I don't know. Right. I don't be knowing. So we'll move on, y'all. Okay. So she mentioned that that people are more curious about the answers to questions about science instead of religion. Instead of questions about religion. Ooh, she dug into religion. I was like, oh,
I knew it was gonna get there.
So she mentioned that people are more curious about the answers to questions about science instead of questions about religion. So a lot of questions about religion is not just about what we don't know, but it is more comfortable that we can't know and that we shouldn't know. Mm-hmm. To some people. This is to some people that don't practice religion. Right. So she mentioned that our beliefs play all different kinds of roles. So the reason why we have the beliefs that we do is because we want to represent the world in a way that gives a model to predict what will happen. Okay, so our beliefs play important social roles. Mm-hmm. They play important moral roles, personal roles, and sometimes, like religion or relationships to certain people or institutions, demanding an explanation might compete with other kinds of goals related to relationships and trust. Mm-hmm. So she stated that there is evidence that science can explain the human mind. So people seem to generally explain why we forget things, which is scientific, but they are less comfortable that science can explain our religious beliefs or our moral behavior, or spiritual experience or our appreciation for art. So what she basically was saying, y'all, was that when it comes to scientifically how our minds operate, like if it's genetics that someone will have Alzheimer's once they reach a certain age, there's science to back up a lot of the of like our thoughts, our thought process, and like how our brain functions. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about religious beliefs, there's no science. She's saying that there's no science to someone's religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. There is none. That is your morals. There's no scientific data to go into morals. That's what she's basically saying. But no, you can give me your counter. Do you have a counter to that?
I think it depends on how deep you go with religion, how deep you study it. I think for the people who study a little deeper, you kind of find that science and religion definitely go together. But, we be throwing shade at people who go to a church building, not condemning them, but a lot of times the people who are up there preaching the sermon are not empowering people to have their own personal experience. So I think I have a way to explain this right here. So maybe because science can explain the mind, people trust it because they can say, oh, I get what they're saying and I've had that experience. Yeah. There's an explanation to it. There's an explanation. when it comes to religion or spiritual beliefs, the explanation is based on the interpretation of the person who's usually the teacher.
Right.
But within organized religion, what we don't find a lot of times is the encouragement for people to study on their own, which is what we do, which means that we then have a relationship with the Most High. And I would say we have scientific evidence. Now, it may not be acceptable for everyone else, but based on our experience, and I'll just talk about me based on my spiritual.
You can say our. I'm with you.
Yeah, like based on our experience, that is evidence at that time because we've had the experience. But if we just went, okay, I got it right here. If we just went to another human being, so if we went to another human being to get to God, we really didn't have that experience. We may or may not have because our mind is in our body.
It's in our body.
So when the science explains how the mind works, our mind is in our body. We have that experience. If we go directly to the Most High, Allah, whatever God that people are worshiping, I call him the Most High. If I go directly to the Most High, then I've had that experience at that point. Then it becomes like my mind in my body, and then I would say that's when my faith has become real from those experiences.
And I think what she's saying is that when it comes to our brain functioning, there's science to back up the brain function. But when it comes to the moral aspects of it or the social aspects of it, really the religious aspects of it, there's no science to back that up because it is within us. So brain functionality is universal. Everyone has brain function. So how the brain functions, it don't matter where you sit spiritually or religiously. Everybody's brain functions the same way. So there's science to back up someone having Alzheimer's, someone having a mental disorder. There's science to prove that. But our own personal beliefs in the Most High, our moral standing, she's just saying there's no science to back that part. That's what she said. That's what I'm interpreting from this psychologist.
I like it, and this is a great conversation.
Yeah,
I got one question for you.
Okay.
So Jim Carrey, I can't remember the name of the documentary, but he was in a documentary, and it was where so I don't know if you would consider, I'm just asking your opinion on what you would consider this. So the experimentation was to show that we're all connected. So if you saw certain images, right? If certain images is flashed on the screen of people in distress or people being hurt, or in those images, like your brain would have a reaction. Would you then say that's only scientific because it's what happens to everyone's brain, or is that also a signifier of a morality that's within us? That
part. So that's what she's saying. So when I'm looking at an image, we're looking at the same image, and I may smile and you may jump. That's still my moral standing on that. May be sadness. You may look at it as, that's fine. So that's more of a social moral standing versus how the brain functions. So that she's trying to separate how the brain functions and processes information, which is the same versus how I look at something. She's trying to separate that and say that when it comes to the science behind that part, there is no science because it's all individual. Kind of like what you said, your experience, your thought process, your brain, that's how you think of things. But the functionality of the brain is something that is common with everybody. That's all she's saying.
I get it.
Yeah, get it? Okay. Okay. So we're gonna move on.
In that experiment.
Well, this is
what an experiment talking about with the documentary with Jim Carrey, they showed people images to get certain reactions and then measure that. And that's how they were just trying to say that we're all connected. Like if you saw images, okay, we went to my office this week, right? And when you looked at the pictures from the Holocaust,
oh Lord,
right? Like humans would have. So I was just trying to get at, do you think do you personally think, is that a scientific thing because our brain operates the same, or is that a morality thing? Because if anybody, I would say, looked at those pictures of babies and just the horrible things, experiments.
You see their bones, literally.
So I guess that's just kind of maybe the little inkling that I'm connecting to, like the morality / spiritual piece of explaining how we all, most humans have that. And if you don't, they say you're what is it, like you're in you're some form of psychosis or social something.
Sociopath.
Sociopath. I was getting there.
You was getting there.
Okay.
So I think it is more of a morality thing. That's why she's saying that science is not tied to how our morals are.
Okay.
That's really what she's saying.
Okay.
There's no science to back up somebody's religious views.
Yeah.
That's all based on morality.
Yes.
That's all she was saying.
Okay.
She stated that we are intuitive dualists. I'm using all these big words. I feel smart, you know, because I be learning. So she stated that we are intuitive dualists. So I'm gonna explain what that means, which is how we think the mind is fundamentally separate from the body. So trying to give a scientific explanation to our eternal experience, we are crossing those levels in an uncomfortable way. So she stated that where we are trying to explain aspects of the mental by appeal to aspects of the physical. So human beings have an innate drive, y'all, to make us discover things. They are important ways that drive us, can lead us astray, though. So you can have different levels of explanations, she said. Sometimes they can be correct in the literal sense, but you miss the larger meaning, right? So another way is focus too much on the bigger picture. So an example, the fire alarm goes off at work. Right, we at work, the fire alarm goes off. Most of us will just sit there and wait for a bigger explanation. Think about it. I know I'm speaking for self. If a fire alarm go off, I don't see no fire outside. I don't see nothing burning.
You don't smell nothing.
I don't smell nothing. I don't see no fire. I'm like, is this a drill? Like, I've already formulated my own story in my head. Once again, that's a story. That's why we tell stories. Is that right there? We create our own stories in our minds of what's really going on, but the explanation is, honey, there could be a fire. The explanation is, oh no, there is one. Get out of the building. So, even when the simple thing to do is act right away and not wait, you think in your mind, is this a drill? Like, this ain't no fire out there. So Tania mentioned that there is a trade-off between getting all the information and learning as much as possible versus acting a way that is efficient.
Okay.
Because I'm guilty of it. A long ago, I'm like, it's a drill because I don't see nothing going on. So creating our own stories, like you even mentioned, can harm because I'm formulating stories that and then I ain't got no explanation. I don't have the explanation for it. Right. So moving on. So she mentioned that one danger of trying to look for a good explanation is that the world is not always well behaved. So she gets deep. Sometimes the world does not provide good explanations. She stated that. Some things just are coincidences. She found in her research that it can sometimes be a good thing because people persist in finding a good one, but discover important things about the world. So, but it can lead to finding good explanations that are not, but they are not found. So, kind of like when we're searching. So, like, I mean, this is kind of deep, but like bringing up police brutality. I you want me to go there. Go ahead. Police brutality, right?
Yeah.
So, trying to find the good. Well, people trying to find the good in police brutality, baby. You're not really gonna find it though. You try to find people try to work their way around, honey, no. The more you dig, the more you realize no, it's police brutality. Now she started talking about politics, y'all. And now I'm getting close to wrapping up. So
I'm getting ready to close.
I'm getting there. She states that when we try to explain something, we are trying to accommodate to what we already believe. I'm gonna say that again.
Okay.
She stated that when we try to explain something, y'all, we are trying to accommodate to what we already believe. The part that makes it simple and compelling is that it fits in with the assumptions we are working with. Once again, creating our own story. That's assumptions. That's assuming stuff. But sometimes trying to explain something might lead us to an inadequacy in our current theorizing. So explanation on one hand can be a way to assimilate what you believe in the content of what you believe. So she stated that in politics, y'all. So she starts talking about politics. Overwhelmingly, it is a force to allow us, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, to assimilate things in the context of what we believe. So think about the conservative media, where they assimilate in the context of what they think we should believe.
Right.
So she stated that political beliefs are deeply ingrained and tied to people's identity.
Yeah.
Oh, you said yeah real quick.
Yeah.
She stated that political beliefs are deeply ingrained and tied to people's identities.
Anybody alive right now in America, or anybody that watches American news, knows that to be a fact.
Well, she believes that the explanation can lead us to the potential to change our beliefs and not just to confirm the ones we already have. But the political discourse makes it difficult for those kinds of conditions to attain.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, okay, you're getting deep to me. So she started to elaborate on conspiracy theories. I'm going to wrap up on conspiracy theories. Y'all ready? Okay. She said that conspiracy theories can be viewed as an error of over-explaining. Many of these conspiracy theories have the characteristic that they take lots of observations, lots of them, that might all have independent explanations and connect them all to one underlying individual or group that is carrying out the intention. So she stated that these kinds of beliefs, though, can be heightened in the context of uncertainty and lack of power.
So that's how QAnon did what it did.
Boom.
Storming the Capitol.
Boom. I mean, it is what it is. In this interview, the interviewer mentioned talking to her, mentioned that when fighting against someone that is using a conspiracy theory, we use evidence against it. You know, thinking about it, right? But it's useful to just ask them to explain their thoughts to us and have them discover the gaps in their own beliefs that are surfaced by this illusion of explanatory depth. I talked about that, the illusion of explanatory depth. She stated that there are elements of this in the political domain, though, like asking people to explain policy, like tax policy.
Right.
And there can be, she didn't say that there can be a learning moment and humility for some individuals that they may not know the entirety of that policy and not be so firm on their perspective and be open enough to revise their beliefs. But in the political discourse that we're in, you won't see it. And I feel like it won't happen. So Tania said that she fell prey to the same thing that she was studying. She said she fell prey to that. She said that when she was in college, when she was a college student, her then boyfriend, now husband, it was her birthday, right? So she was closing on this story. It was her birthday. And on the way to her dinner, her then boyfriend said, dang, we need to go to the library and get some books. So she was like, so I'm second place to dinner? Like, what's going on? We going to the library on the way to dinner. What's going on? But she realized that she had to revise her thoughts. Because guess what? At the library, her then boyfriend had gifts under each book that he had her locate.
That's sweet.
So in her mind, she's like, the library over here second. She's creating her own story in her mind about how this is happening. Like, why are we going to the freaking library? We're supposed to be having dinner. It's our anniversary, and we're going to the library. But didn't realize that each book he had her locate, there was a gift right there that tied to the dinner.
That's a good. I'm gonna do that. That's a good idea. I'm gonna take that.
Oh yeah, you may need to do that in the future. Right. So all in all, I'm wrapping up on this. All in all, why we tell stories tells us something important, y'all. It really does. The story that we paint about explanations is not just a story about how we think about politics or science, but is also about the people in our lives. like you and I, like our parents, our children, our colleagues, and our significant others. We tend to draw these quick explanations about why they do what they do, but the conclusions could be wrong. And we need to slow down and ask ourselves, how do I know what I think I know? Her final comment is asking, thinking about alternative explanations are both powerful tools to help us overcome some of our tendencies to leap to conclusions and go with our familiar explanations. And that is all I got. That ends why we tell stories.
That is some good stuff. And I really was just, maybe I view everything through relationships these days, because I think that is, in 2015, when I was in DC, most people know that there's a problem with suicide in the military. And they were reading all these cases, and every single one of them were situations in which somebody was in a relationship that was unhealthy. And so all these people had committed suicide. And I just looked at my own life, and I'm like, that's when I stopped dating, when I was in DC, because I'm like, I have all these relations. I know people. I have these connections, or like Cat Williams said, situationships. And I'm like, but what is really, I'm giving of myself, my time, my resources. And I'm like, maybe I should change that. And so I did. And I think in the how that relates to why we tell stories is, most of us, I'm learning myself, like I'm an indigenous person. I'm a deeply spiritual person. And the way that I think and the way that I am is not somebody who is with this Western capitalistic, like, let me go. And like, there's certain things in my life, like I took a pause from school because with work and then divorce, and then, it was just way too much. And I'm like, I have other opportunities to go to school. Some other people, I'm not a person who can do all of that and carry all of that at once. But some other people can. But just because you can, I don't know if you should. And so in looking at the whole why we tell stories thing, I view it from like a community perspective, and the wisdom. Like, if I am fully known to you and I'm fully authentic and honest with you, then you're going to know who I am, and you're going to know how to advise me. So I should tell my story and share, because you can bring wisdom into my life. If you couldn't, I probably personally would not share as much of my story, or I would share it first just to see, okay, what am I going to get? And then, like, I love talking to older Black folks who lived in harsh conditions, to be able to give me some type of frame of reference. Because in looking at the indigenous people, right, like, we are indigenous, like that's our culture. And if you're going to look into that, you realize, how is history passed down? And so when you tie that back to the scriptures on who we are as Hebrews, as Israelites, if you're really going to go there and you're really going to look deeper into it, then you're going to see that the reason why many of us don't know who we are is because it said it in there. That like, look, me and my friend were on the phone, Shantae, we were on the phone, and we were talking about the Ma'Khia Bryant death and the difference in this shooting. And, we walked through it. But the interesting thing about that is the adults were outside. There was a grown man who was also involved with the fight. The sins of the father visit the children. We could clearly see that, right? Even the conservatives will say that, right? And so when we tell our stories, like, there's a lot of community. And I think that's what the control in the political arena is about, and in the media. So for you to tell your story the way they want you to tell your story. We saw, George Floyd, and we saw the video, but let somebody else tell you, you didn't see what you saw. You know what I mean? Every situation is a different situation, but to approach it as a situation is not about what somebody told us it is. I think it's how we keep our authentic story with one another and how we build that community. And having people be open to our interpretations and being open to theirs and being able to come together, because everything's inflammatory, right? Like the current culture we're living in, it's funny because everything is inflammatory, and there's this whole idea of cancel culture. But if you talk to us, we've talked about that. It's not really, we didn't view it as a cancel culture, really. It's just you're being held accountable for your actions. You're being
I have a word for it.
Okay.
Consequence culture.
Consequence culture. So
instead of counseling them, consequence.
Right.
You suffer the consequences.
Right.
Because I feel like, well, no, I cut you off.
No, fine. Go ahead.
I feel like with cancel culture, with the cancel culture, it could lead to someone taking their own life and not seeking forgiveness. If you cancel them, now, yes, they need to be held accountable, but if they seek the Most High and seek forgiveness and repentance, because that's what, I mean, you know, Jesus died for our sins, that's what I'm saying. So I feel that I don't know why that word just came up, but instead of cancel culture, I feel that we need to be calling it consequence culture, which is what Derek Chauvin about to get.
Right. I like it. And I think that, you know, so comedian Godfrey was making fun of, like, if you go on the Clubhouse app, like everyone's always like,
hey, you sent me a few I haven't looked at yet. I haven't looked at them yet.
Okay. So he did this one, and he was just talking about how everybody on Clubhouse is like, we need to change the narrative, you know, and he's just like, he's kind of mocking the idea, but it is really true. Like, and you know, I have conversations with some of my friends, and it's like not just changing the narrative, but actually being strategic and actually doing something. Like, I want to be part of a conversation that's going somewhere, like doing something, not just, you know. And I think that the telling the stories part, the reason why this is so prominent right now is because there's such an attempt to not tell the truth. Right? Like, there's such an attempt to not acknowledge. And that's why I love talking to older people. We need to talk to older people. We need to talk to people who have more wisdom than us, and live longer than us, even if it's just they live longer than us, and find something within their story that we can relate to our current time. And I think, you know, that's how we can all be smarter, because thinking about American history, go back to the beginning. You know, for people who say racism doesn't exist, or there's no such thing as systemic or institutional racism, go back to the genesis of America, and then work your way forward. Because I think the problem with America, when we tell stories with our citizens, there's the talking heads, and then there's also people who listen to those talking heads, which we talk about, and they're regurgitating information, but that's not what they know and or have experienced. So at that point, how can your story be valid or validated? And so what happens, I've learned something, and I've had friends who are on different sides of the political spectrum, and what it allowed me to do was to figure out what really matters. At the end of the day, if we disagree politically, does that really matter? Does it really have a bearing? Does it really have a bearing on our friendship? And maybe what we can do is just live out our lives in such a way where it makes somebody want to change. Living out your story, sharing your personal story like we do here, like in such a way to uplift and edify, and doing it in a way where we're still being authentic. Sometimes we might be abrasive, sometimes it might be harsh, but it's always coming from a place of truth. It's always coming from a place of love, even if it's seemingly negative news. Because, you know, your story, everything about your story, just like, you know, the what's her name again? Tania. Just like Tania talked about, everything in the world ain't good. Humans do some horrible things to one another. But what we can do is find the good. And I'm in summary of my comments now, I was having a conversation about, you know, Derek Chauvin and the verdict with someone. And, you know, we got heated. He disagreed, we disagreed, but we're respectful to one another. And I was like, let's end on a positive note. And the positive note is that, you know, throughout generations, when you look at the angry mob, as the defense tried to portray, meaning the people who stopped from a 9-year-old to I think
16.
he was in his 60s. From a 9-year-old to a 60-year-old, from an MMA fighter to an EMS, worker, everybody stopped to watch what Derek Chauvin was doing, and they all knew it was wrong. I was like, so if nothing else, we can have faith in humanity based on that.
In the diversity of the folks that watch.
Yes.
And different ages, different races, different.
And they all did something in their own way to try to diffuse the situation.
Mm-hmm.
We could, you could always argue if they could have did more, should have did more, or whatever. But I appreciate what the one young lady said who took the stand. She was like, I have some sleepless nights, and I'm still, traumatized by the situation. And I think, maybe I should have done more to step in. But she's like, it's not what I should have done. It's what Officer Chauvin should have done. Mm-hmm. And I was just like,
boop. That was a boop right there. But, you said, I think you said the judge, because I didn't see that part, but you said the judge, like, try to cut her off.
Yeah, like it was like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because she went to attack mode. Like,
yes.
You should have did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very powerful. And so thank you, Andre. Like, you did a really good job.
Thank you.
And I really like it. And I hope that, everyone feels empowered who watched the show to authentically tell their stories, and be around people who want to hear your story. And maybe and also give them the room to not be as excited about your story as you are about all the details, because maybe they're just a different type of communicator, mm-hmm. right? Like maybe they communicate differently. And so but I think in the sense of community and relationships, this was an amazing episode to let us know why we tell stories.
Just why we do it. And like I wanted to talk about the science behind it, because I feel that it's important to really know how our mind works. And I think that's what she was trying to relay. Like, okay, this is why we do it. Mm-hmm. And then this is like, and she even, for her to even provide personal stories of that. Like, she's in the middle of studying this and realizing like, oh, well, I'm overthinking. Like, I created a whole story in my head on like, why they up at 3 a.m. and now I see it's a cute moment. Instead of me being like, get your behind back in bed, is now she's like, oh, they're having a whole cute moment. So I just found that interesting with why we tell stories. I'm glad you put that perspective in there of, well, make sure you're authentically. Yeah. You got to be authentic. Right. You definitely have to be. So I will say this, there's two more parts to not why we tell stories. So it'll be a different title, but it's a 3-part. I have 3 parts of information in reference to storytelling, but it's not going to be called Why We Tell Stories, y'all. But just be ready for 2 more episodes of the science behind storytelling. There's a second layer that I'm going to be talking to you all about in the coming weeks, because I think we got a lot going on. So ain't no telling when we're coming back. But just be ready for the next 2 episodes to tie into storytelling. But it's 3 parts to storytelling. So just be ready for that. So I'm excited to share.
And there was 2 other things that I thought about, or maybe just one, like storytelling, why we tell stories. It makes me think about identity. We talked about politics being ingrained with identity now, but I think it also helps our relationships grow stronger together. And the example I want to use is like maybe somebody with their parent or their guardian, and your parent or your guardian keeps it all the way real with you. They tell you, that they got high, they smoke weed, they what I mean? Like they show the human aspect that they were young once too. Yes, they were they grew up in society too, where the same kind of, for some people want to call them temptations, if you want to call it that, like where, or experimentation that they're human too, because sometimes we have an idea of who a person is and we don't know the fullness of them. And maybe by them being more relatable, because they're now telling you this story, your relationship can grow stronger together and you can have a deeper impact.
I like that.
Like young women who had an abortion or or thinking about abortion, and then they find out their mother had an abortion.
And there's politics behind that too, though.
Right.
Because you have one side saying, "Oh no, they're pro-life," and then pro-choice. It's just
that, and what I think is amazing with that piece. Okay, so if we want to bring that to it, what I think is amazing about that piece is, I can be pro-life all day long, but that doesn't mean that should be your story. I shouldn't be writing your story. And if I'm pro-life, right, and I think that's what the political arena is polarizing, because both sides are trying to teach both sides what to do, but we should legislate off of, you know, what is good for all. Like just create a life. If we don't want people to have abortions, this is what I think: have take care of everyone. Give everyone, like, why in America do we not have healthcare in the midst of a pandemic still? Create situations where people, where a young woman in college or a young man in college, like, that's not the best option for them, to where they can still afford to live a life and move on. Create situations in which, you know, like, hey, we want to encourage you to put your baby up for adoption. You know, create situations that are you know, more conducive to the life continuing. And the best way to do that, the best way to encourage somebody to change that I've found in my life in telling my story, is by sharing your story, and then by loving. You ever want somebody to change? You don't change by thumping them on the head like, you should do this. You tell your story, you talk about your struggles, how you made it. Testimony. You tell people how you made it. You share the religion that you are, the God that you serve. You pray with that person and introduce them to the Most High, and then, you know, then go from there. But I think that's all I really have, and this was an amazing show, and it's great that we get to do it here together in person. But Andre was kind of sad, and Alex had mentioned it too yesterday about, you know, we don't get the background.
I didn't want to say that. I was going, you know, but I was secretly in my feelings, y'all. But yes, I'm in my feelings because I love the fact that I'm here. I can touch Brandon and everything, but I'm all about the graphics, and Brandon puts so much work into the graphics anyway, as it is. He does. But I kind of wish that we were able to kind of be smaller for y'all to see, a little bit smaller, but still see the background of like what our topic was, because he created the graphics for Why We Tell Stories, and that could have been a graphic for y'all to see. But I mean, at least we have the ability to like show it. Like when we leave, we'll show it again. You know, when we leave, and you'll see like the banner and everything that we created, that, you know, that Brandon created. So yeah. But yeah, other than that, that's all I got. And like I said, be ready for 2 more parts of storytelling. It's going to be titled something different, but just be ready for that. So, yeah.
Okay. See y'all next time. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment. See y'all next.